going to call the meeting to order. President Spicer and board member Sirke will be attending tonight's meeting remotely pursuant to AB 2449. Unfortunately, both are sick, so I will also be running the meeting. And that also means that for this meeting, unlike our usual practice, the board will be accepting public comment in person as well as by Zoom or by phone. Also let everyone know that a recording and or broadcast of this meeting is being made at the direction of the board, which may capture images and sounds of those attending the meeting. Since some of us are remote, I will now call the roll. Mr. Talio. Here. Mr. Ivanovich. Here. President Spicer.
Here. Here.
Now, we pledge allegiance to the student excited about leading.
Everybody please stand. Push your right hand over your heart. Where you begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with justice.
Thank you very much. Move on to C3 agenda approval. Are there any board members who would like to provide a comment on the agenda? Seeing any, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. So moved. Second. Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Steve. Call the roll. Steve. Jessica.
Yes.
Molly.
Yes.
Yes. Motion passes 5-0. Item 4, closed session reports. No action was taken in those sessions. Which we don't have 5 minutes of.
All right, so we are shared the dates for the months coming up between now and the end of the year. Wednesday night this week we have I believe they start at 5:30. And then also this Wednesday night, STEM Expo is 5:30 to 7 is the string fling block, which is an opportunity for 6th grade string students to take 8 string orchestra. So over at Block at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, great event. I'll be there. 2 other items to share. One is, and perhaps Chris will share this later, we're pleased to let you all know that we reached a with LATA, our Teachers Association. I want to appreciate Chris and the negotiating team, and we are still working with the CFDA folks. That is still in process. And then my final piece I wanted to share with you came to me late Friday afternoon, and you may or may not have heard about this. But Mary Angela, the superintendent, shared that there are some CDPH guidelines that are changing effective March 15th. So I will do it for you, but wanted to just let you know, outside of schools, the masking requirement, risk settings, it's been nursing homes, wants to make a difference, but what really will impact us is reduced isolation time after a positive COVID test. So beginning March 13th, it's easier. A COVID-19 positive person may end isolation after 5 days if they feel well, have improving symptoms, and are fever-free without medication. They do not have to have a negative test anymore. So Monica, our lead nurse, is working on updating our guidelines. All of that falls in line with the 7 surgeries. So all of the world will be implemented. But I wanted to let you know because that is a change in practice for us. What is great is that we will have kids that experience if they're feeling just
Thank you.
Tally has her hand up. Sorry, we can't hear.
Yeah, exactly.
I discovered while trying to listen that when you're facing the owl, we can hear you better than if you're facing the other board members. Sorry. I think that seems to be the better way we could hear. Otherwise, it's a tunnel and we can't hear.
All right, sorry about that.
Was that it, or was there a question from you or Shelley?
No, I was just gonna make a comment about what Jessica just said.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. All right, we'll move on then to the Almond School presentation.
Good evening. I am Rachel Menor-Foley. I am the proud principal of Almond Elementary School, and thank you so much for inviting us here tonight to share with you a little bit about our school. We have Mr. Linville and Ms. Dabob, who are our two sixth grade teachers, and they will be introducing the students who will be sharing about a project that they have been working on at school. So I'm going to invite Mr. Linville up, and he will introduce them to you.
Hello, everyone. I am Brett Linville. I'm a sixth grade teacher at Almond. I teach many things in sixth grade, so does Miss Dabob, math, social studies, and science. And so we're going to give you a little bit of what we've learned in science. We earlier in the year learned about the water cycle, and something that I try to do as a science teacher is after we learn a concept, we try to apply it, and either through design or through some sort of project. So this is a project we did maybe in October. You're gonna have to remind me, it's been a while, but they've been rehearsing and refreshing their memories about it. And so we learned about the water cycle, the different steps, but then my challenge to them was how we could improve water conservation at Almond. So they came up with various ideas in groups of 3, and they were excited. They were actually chosen by their classmates to present here. And so I'm just gonna give the floor to them, but if you have any questions or follow-up that you want to, feedback that you want to give them, you can always go through me and I'd be happy to pass that along. Yeah, so first group, you all ready?
Yeah.
Okay, come on up. I'm gonna move this forward.
We do have something that you can look at if you want to pass.
This is our water conservation project. I'm Igor.
I'm Sasha.
I'm Ryan.
We will be talking about how this project works and how it will help conserve water.
So how it works is when it rains, the water trickles into this water spout, which usually just dumps all the water onto the concrete, rendering it useless. But if we can make it a little deeper and route it into a chamber area where you store filter media. The goal of filter media is to biomedia is to get rid of excessive nitrates by beneficial bacteria that break them down. And if the correct filter media is used, you can actually create an anaerobic environment for anaerobic bacteria, breaking down nitrates into nitrogen gas, making it have less waste in it. Once the water is filtered, it can be put into a large tank for other uses.
Afterwards, the water can be used for landscaping purposes such as watering a field and school gardens. It can also be used for toilets and sinks inside of bathrooms. The water cannot be used for drinking due to the fact that it is rainwater.
This design can help save water because without a mechanism to capture the rain, it flows onto the concrete where it cannot be soaked up into groundwater. Therefore, it is purposeless. With this idea put into action, it would be redirected to other facilities that use water rather than them using up more of our valuable fresh water that we have left. Overall, it would be repurposing perfectly good rainwater without harming the environment. Thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, please let us know. We conducted an experiment in our school, and we filled out some charts for you to do. Hello, we are sixth graders from Almond Elementary. I'm Devisha Mathur.
I'm Elise Pullman.
And I'm Aurora Dula. Today, we'll tell you about the inefficiency of our school's bathroom sinks. In an experiment we conducted a few months ago, we learned that classroom sinks are more reliable than bathroom sinks.
Classroom sinks conserve more water and are bigger to prevent water from splashing on the floor like in bathrooms. A few students use them.
There are different types of sinks. In our classrooms, we have sinks with handles for turning off and on. The water pressure of these sinks is higher, but also different. Classroom sinks spray less water and are more reliable.
Our bathrooms have sinks with buttons that turn on for inconsistent amounts of times, frustrating many students.
Bathroom sinks are inefficient. They spray water onto students' arms and clothing. A minor issue magnified by the lack of paper towels in the 4 student bathrooms at Almond. Students try to wash their hands for at least 20 seconds. Many cannot, however, because bathroom sinks do not turn on for long enough. After timing different sinks at Almond, we found the average time on is 16 seconds, with the lowest being 13 and the highest being 20.
Bathroom sinks don't allow students to turn them off, wasting water when used for other purposes that don't require 20 seconds worth of water, like cleaning items. Water is wasted by these sinks when students get soaked too.
Sinks waste water and are inefficient. In our experiment, we collected data to support our initial hypothesis. Bathroom sinks are less efficient than classroom sinks because they waste water. We recorded the total water wasted, which includes the water wasted while getting soaked and the water wasted waiting for it to turn on. We also recorded the water wasted solely for getting soaked, the water output in 20 seconds, and the water from the spray. The average water output for bathroom sinks is about 570 milliliters in 20 seconds, while classroom sinks give more than 3 times that with 1,840 milliliters in 20 seconds.
Bathroom sinks waste around 170 milliliters more than classroom sinks for every single handle.
They wasted around 215 milliliters from getting soap, 90 milliliters more than classroom sinks, and almost 5 times as much water from the spray.
Our data shows that bathroom sinks are inefficient and waste water. Compared to classroom sinks, they don't function properly and should be replaced with ones that students can turn on and off.
Bathroom sinks still might be better for younger students who forget to turn off faucets. However, we believe there are still ways to make Almond sinks more efficient.
We believe the problems of spray and inconsistent time are caused by the sink's age, which could be resolved by replacing them.
By making this change at our school or even other schools, we'd be doing our part to save water. Thank you for listening to our presentation on the inefficiency of bathroom sinks. We hope you consider our proposal to replace these sinks.
Eric, have you made notes down?
Great points. Thank you for listening to our students. I'm Kathy Day, Bob, the other 6th grade teacher that shares the 50 students at Almond. I have to say it's great pleasure to be here and represent Almond. I am the 30th year of teaching, and I have found that collaborating with Brett has been a true gift and sharing the 50 students, and we've been working a lot on their collaboration and their presentation skills. And I can say that many of them are going to come ready, you know, to Egan or Black, whichever they go to show those skills to all of you. So I'm very appreciative of the 6 students who are here to represent their classes. And again, we highly value the students' input, so they vote on their classmates. And they do that in my class when I teach language arts. I teach the reading and writing, and the presentations are then posted in our Thursday Word or sent home to parents, and they're voting on their top representatives for the class that they feel represents the class the best. So that always gives the students the power to be able to have a voice. And so thank you for listening to us tonight, and please stop by our school anytime. We'd love to see all of you in our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? My fellow board members, Jessica or Shally, anything? Hearing nothing, thank you very much for coming and presenting to us. feel free to slip quietly out the back. Or right as a riveting meeting, but feel free to stay if you'd like to see more about how the board works. I will give them a minute. All right, moving on to the consent calendar. Are there any board members who would like to provide comment on the consent calendar? Jessica or Shelley? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second, motion made by Vladimir, seconded by Steve. I will call the roll. Steve,
Yes.
Vladimir,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Shelley.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Item G1, employee request to address the board. Mr. Hazelton.
Hi, everyone. I love how I lean down, like, I know it's on microphone, but I do. So I want to just say a huge thank you to the board for entertaining the idea of kind of reframing how we do teacher pay in Los Altos and really making it a priority. I know that that took and will take some ongoing work. And the best part about it is I think that as I've been able to speak to teachers, they feel the appreciation. A lot of my work early in the year was kind of telling you what the teachers did, what they contribute, how hard they're working, what their work-life balance is, how much it costs to live in this area. And that all led to kind of the realization that we made as a team together, the bargaining team for LATA and also the bargaining team for LASD, kind of realizing that this needed to be a different type of conversation. And I'm really grateful to Sandra for being willing to take that risk and really being an open collaborator with our union to really get results for our members. And I want you to know that going forward, we're happy to partner with our PAC committee around the parcel tax and things that need to be passed for the district in order to make this sustainable in the long run. And we're well aware of that. And so I want you to know that we're also making that commitment to you tonight. So thank you so much for helping. And I look forward to March 20th. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Just like a quick comment that don't forget, it's the staff that did most of the work. The board just stood there regally and allowed the staff the opportunity to earn their pay.
Yes, yes, this is very true. And I know that very well. I think last week, well, first of all, I was sick all week long. But Sandra and I probably spoke on the phone
So many times.
many times. At one point, I was on a virtual meet with our bargaining team and on a conference call with Carrie, Sandra, Demetrio, our CTA rep, Melissa, and myself, paused on one meet, having a conference call on the other meet, just to get it done. So we're very well aware of that. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Thank you. Shay for CSEN.
Thank you. We are looking forward to the board standing regally and letting the staff take the CSEA as well. But I did want to take a moment today to kind of bring it down a little bit and to make a sober comment about layoffs, because we do have a layoff on the agenda tonight. And it is always a little sad when we have layoffs due to lack of funds, not because of lack of work. I'm talking about item 5, which is laying off 2 school nurse positions. As you all know, nurses, and especially here in the LASD, are no different. They've been working tirelessly the past 3 years, and this year we've enjoyed having nurses at most school sites most of the time. COVID is still here. We have colds, we have viruses, we have school injuries, we have students who need medication help at school. And this year we've had employee nurses providing most of those services, most of the days, most of our sites. Our students and parents rely on this service. They become part of our communities. They become part of what parents and students enjoy seeing and working with our nurses. I'm tempted to say that their work has been priceless, that they provide services that money can't buy, but we know that we do have to pay for these services. And we have a high level of care, and that requires cost. Losing these school nurses is a loss to our students, it's a loss to our community, and I wanted to mention that and keep that in mind tonight as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so going forward, I'm going to make a little bit of announcement, a public comment, just because we're in this unusual hybrid format. So to provide public comment on an agenda item, if attending in person, please submit a speaker card to the superintendent. Provide public comment on an agenda item if you're attending remotely, please use the raise hand button if using the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Prior to providing your comment, please be sure your microphone is on. Requests received after public comment has begun on an agenda item will not be accepted, and your name will be announced when it is your turn to speak. Item H, community comments. This time is reserved for members of the public and employees to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board is not permitted to discuss or take action on non-agenda items, except to instruct the superintendent to review the matter further, report back to the board at a subsequent meeting, or place the matter on a future agenda. The board may make a brief comment or ask clarifying questions. Do we have anyone who wishes to provide public comment for items not on the agenda? Seeing none, we will move straight on to action discussion items. Number 1, second interim financial report. Mr. Wallachevich.
Hey, good evening. We're here tonight to present the second interim. And this is a time where we can look at our budget since adoption and see if any changes that have happened since first interim, which was in December. This is all expenditures and revenue from July 1st through the end of January. So we'll go next slide. So some good news, since first interim, the following changes are reflected. Property tax growth is at 7.94%. Our adopted budget was a 5% property tax growth. So since adoption, it's grown almost 3 full percent. That's an increase of about 145,000. Our transfer to the charter school is a slight decrease of 122,000. And then our expenditures, we've seen a slight reduction, some unfilled budgeted positions. So at our adopted budget, there were some assumptions made for some positions. Some of the vacancies that were not filled, we decided to close those vacancies as we're late in the budget season that are going to be unfilled positions, and that's about a $600,000 savings. So next slide. Our general fund assumptions for this year: secured local property tax growth 7.94%. Parcel tax is a 9.6 million in revenue. Part of the parcel tax will be expiring. Measure GG expires in 2025. Guaranteed state aid of 734,000. Mandated block grant, Prop 55, lottery unrestricted, and then due to the charter school, you'll see the slight decrease where it's 9.8, we're down to about 9.7, and then that number will be revised in the summer when we settle up when the next property tax numbers come in. Next slide. General fund revenue. The bulk of our revenue is local in nature, property taxes and the parcel tax. If you see, you add those two up, 87% of our revenue for the district is local in nature. And that's, and as a basic aid school districts, we're right on course with what everyone else is. Slight, very small amount of federal revenue, mostly from special ed allocations and some Title I and Title II money. And then the state revenue is a little bit higher this year, and that's because some of the one-time funds, the state revenue that the district usually receives is a little bit smaller than that. Next slide. Local property taxes, this is what it looked like at first interim. You can see the secured property tax is a slight increase. And that's the one that we really look at. That's secured by homes and businesses. Unsecured is property inside the home, inside businesses, machinery, equipment that actually went up, and that's a number that's sometimes quite volatile. And then homeowner exemptions is a slight increase. So overall, total increase 431,000, but secured is the number that we look at mostly. Next slide. Here's our 3-year summary. And from year to year, you can see property tax growth. We've seen a nice change from the last 2 years. And it's really great news for the district because the basic aid school district, we rely heavily on property taxes, and they're very difficult to predict. We get monthly reports from the county assessor's office. We look at those reports and look at previous trends and see where we're at. With interest rates being hiked to really curb and slow down inflation, we are going to see probably a little bit of a slowdown in the economy. So in the out years, that'll be reflected in multi-years. Next slide. Unrestricted state revenue, which I talked about earlier. You can see of our overall budget, state revenue, this is the unrestricted revenue that we can be using for ongoing expenses and salaries. Not a lot of money that comes from the state, but we appreciate any dollar we can get. Next slide. And then our general fund exemptions, and in fact, which is great, there's a little asterisk on the bottom of this. We're actually, and I could change the slide right now if I had a chance to do it. We have a tentative agreement, which is great news, really exciting news for everyone. Do that. So we'll be bringing back a AB 1200 disclosure in the March 20th meeting. Step and calm is 1.5%, no health insurance changes, and those are some statutory benefits. Next slide. And Larry is going to kind of talk about some of the statutory benefit rates. And these are things that when we look at our budget, we were always looking at the rates and planning for the out years as they start to increase.
Yes, statutory benefit rates are mandatory benefit rates that employers are required by law to provide to all employees. This fiscal year, there are 2 things that actually increase. One is STIRS and the other is FERS. STIRS increased from 16.9 from fiscal year 21-22 to 19.10 in fiscal year 22-23. For CalPERS, there's been an increase from 19.10% to 22.9% to 25.37%. In addition, CalPERS PEPRA members has also increased in their contribution by 1%, used to be 7%, now is 8%. Next slide, please. For cafeteria fund, fiscal year 22-23 Universal Meal Program started and builds the foundation of the National School Program and School Breakfast Program. As a result, Los Altos School District built the program from ground up and funded it from general funds in the amount of $2.9 million. During first interim financial reporting, there was an increase in the expenditure by $513,000, which resulted in an increase in contribution from general funds with a total new program cost now of $3.4 million. Currently, we don't have any changes in the state and federal revenues as projected. However, for the expenditures, there is a slight reduction of $65,000, which is for the salaries and benefits expenses due to reduction of the unfilled positions. Although expenses were down and we didn't feel that we needed to adjust the budget at this time, we needed to stay conservative and maintain the projection as is. I'm going to pass it back to Eric.
Okay, next slide. So special education from first interim to second interim, good news. A lot of the savings that we talked about, some staffing changes, with some unfilled positions. And so you see the salaries as a decrease, benefits as a decrease, and then all other. All other is transportation and non-public school supplies, contracted services. We have a budget that gets transferred to Fund 70, which is our transportation fund for special education. That's about a $500,000 budget for that. So there's a slight decrease in that. So our general fund contribution to special ed is a decrease of $900,000, which is great news. And we feel pretty confident we can hold those numbers. We did hire 2 new staff members. That's on, one of them is on the personnel report. So we still feel our budget is in good shape for this year. One thing I want to point out is the general fund contribution. If you look at special education, they did have a slight increase in federal revenue and also some local state revenue increase as well. But the one thing I want to point out here, it's very interesting when you look at it. Special education is not fully funded. And so is the programs that we serve our students are very important programs, but it's not fully funded from the state or from the federal government. So the district has required, that's what general fund contribution means. We actually have to contribute money from our unrestricted general fund to fund that program. And that is when we talk about advocating your legislatures and things, these are things we always talk about is how can we fully fund special education? And we're not the only district that experiences this. Every district in the state really does not have enough funds for special education. It's such an important program for our students. So I always want to point out how important it is, see if there's a way we could have the legislature at any level help fully fund this program. Next slide. Here's our actuals from year to year. Total expenses you can see from 2021 is 12.3. Last year was 14.1. This year at second interim, we're projecting at 16.48. And our general fund contribution, you see as the program has grown, some of that was some COVID funding. And I also want to point out some of this budget, I don't want to say it's not real, but there are some expenses by the end of the year. There are some staff that were hired that were being coded to special education that we feel like they're supporting more general education students. And so by the end of the year, we'll be recoding some things. It's still a cost to our budget, but I think it kind of artificially inflates the special education budget. So we're gonna be working with our staff to make sure any people that are coded to special ed, if they're serving special needs students, then that's where they should be coded. But if they're serving general education students, we want to recode that. So we'll be, by the end of the year, when we close out our budget, we give you the estimated actuals at adoption in June, you'll see a slight change in those numbers. Next slide. Okay, here's our multi-year projections. And not only do we need to meet our financial obligations for this fiscal year, but also in our next 2 out years. And so this is where we look at our multi-year projections in revenue and expenses. So we'll go next slide. Secured property tax growth for this year, we feel very good about 7.9% growth. Next year, though, right now, the county assessor's office, we saw a report last month was 5.1, but that's just secured. And so at adoption, well, right now, until we get more information, we're at 5%. And then 3% growth the next year. And the reason we want to be more conservative in the out years is because of inflation. The Federal Reserve has already raised interest rates several times. We know they're going to probably do it at least 1 or 2 more times. So we need to be cautious of that triggering a recession, and that slowdown of home buying in our area could affect AB growth. So we need to be very mindful of that. All the other assumptions that we talk about and are there for us. No real changes. There'll be a slight decrease in some of these numbers. If we get a slight decrease in enrollment, it does affect some of our ADA that's funded by some of these, but not too many of them. Next slide. Multi-year expenditures, salary schedules, no changes for all groups today, but in 2 more weeks, there will be some changes, which is great news. Staffing changes due to some position control cleanup. We talked about that earlier in some of the savings of 604,000. That's where we can actually change our budget a little bit. 10 FTEs is predicted for next year's staffing changes and a reduction, and then 4 FTEs in 24-25, and that's classified and certificated based on enrollment numbers. And then health and welfare is about 7.5% annual increase that we always budget for. Next item. This is what Larry was talking about, CalPERS. The CalSTRS rates, if you can see the changes, how it went from 16.92 to 19.9, that's the employer percentage. And we have to be mindful of these because these do cost the district a lot of money. And this is the CalSTRS employer contribution. The next slide is the one that talks about CalPERS. And you can see the increases. And CalPERS is the first pension plan that has basically said, yes, we are raising our rates for the employer contribution. So you can see this year is at 25.37. And the next couple out years, you can see, look what it gets to in 27, 28, 30%. So that's a huge increase. And as we do our multi-year budgets, we'll be looking at these numbers and budgeting accordingly. And we'll have to set aside more money for pension plans for CalPERS. CalPERS is mostly classified employees, and there are some certificated that pay into CalPERS, but it's mostly for classified staff as well. Next slide. Multi-year revenue. I really try to focus on unrestricted general fund revenue because that is our biggest part of our budget. And if you look at our total revenue, 50.5 for this year, 51.6 and 52.3. Next slide. And salary and benefits, you can see for the next 2 years. And then the other finances, that is the transfer out to the cafeteria fund. So this year at 1.6, we're going to try to use some of our one-time money to get that number down before we close the books this year. And then in 23-24 and 24-25, our transfer out to the cafeteria fund will be 1.1. And then in negotiations, when we give raises, that will cost our transfer out to the other funds will go up as well, because part of our transfer out is paying for salaries as well. So that's it, that'll be increased contribution to the transfer out to the cafeteria fund as well. Next slide. And if you look at our multi-year projection for beginning balance is very healthy at 13.1. With our revenue, we're predicting a surplus this year of 1.4 million. Then we have our special reserve fund 17 of 3.5. So 22% reserve, then 24, and then 23. I think it's kind of coming off the bottom of the screen there. But we'll have a slight, because property taxes are expected to decline a little bit, we'll see a slight deficit spending in the third out year. So, and then the next slide is this is our budget where we're at. We're doing enrollment projections right now in February and March. Second term is today. We'll start talking to the sites about their budget allocations for next fiscal year. And then we'll wrap up this year with unaudited actuals in September. And our final audit report for this fiscal year will be in December. And then next slide. And tonight we're asking the board, it's an action item, that the district will have a positive certification. We will meet our financial obligations for the current year and the 2 subsequent fiscal years. And so this is an action item for approval tonight.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Clarifying questions from my fellow board members? Either in person or online? Are there any requests for public comment? No. Any further discussion? Yeah.
I think in previous interim reports that we used to get, we had at least one slide on how we did versus our enacted budget. And I noticed, I don't think you included that in this thing here. Can you just say a couple of words about roughly where we are compared to our enacted budget from last year?
I think we're in better financial position than our active budget. So at our adopted budget, at the beginning of the year, we were predicting I believe a negative $682,000 deficit. And so we're on the other side of that, which is great, at a $1.4 million surplus.
So about $2 million.
Yeah,
less.
About $2 million change. So that's some reduced staffing allocations and then some increased revenue.
Okay, all right, thanks, that's all I had.
Yeah, good news, actually.
Yeah.
Great question.
Okay, Jessica or Shelley, anything? No? Okay. I'll just make the comment that obviously, given the timing, which is a little unfortunate, I think, for real numbers, having come up with the TA shortly before this. Personally, I'm still comfortable, even though we're certifying sort of the numbers prior to the agreement, that the numbers post the agreement will still meet this criteria. So I think it's appropriate for us to go ahead and continue. So I'm willing to entertain a motion to approve the second interim financial report.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Steve. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the roll. Steve? Yes. Vladimir?
Yes.
Jessica?
I don't know, we couldn't hear her.
Yes, sorry, the space button didn't work that time.
Shelley?
Yes.
I vote yes, motion passes 5-0. We'll move on to financial outlook update.
Okay. So tonight, it's not so much the preliminary budget, it's just kind of also an outlook on the future, some challenges that we're going to be facing as a district. And so we just want to be mindful that although things are looking really well for us, we also need to be cautious. As I mentioned, with some of the CalPERS rates and the property taxes declining, we need to also have the spirit of cautiousness. It's okay, cautiously optimistic is a term I use sometimes. Next slide. So second interim, we are in a healthy financial position. I'm glad Vladimir asked the question, how are we doing since adoption? We're actually doing a lot better than we were at the adopted budget, which is great news. We are some challenges though. I think economic growth is going to be slowing for sure. There's obviously some layoffs in the tech industry that affect some of our families in this community. And the number one thing I think we're excited about having a tentative agreement is that to need to be competitive with our salaries for our employees. and to address the increasing cost of living. And I'm really happy that we're gonna be able to do that this year. I think that's a great thing. It is a challenge, but it's also something we need to do. There's a need also, though, however, to right size our staffing due to some one-time COVID funds going away. And some smaller enrollment from post-pandemic. So a lot of the families that kind of left, that we're kind of thinking they were gonna come back, not all of them have come back yet. And we're not sure if they're when they will, but also, if you look at our staffing over the years before COVID happened in 2018, 2019, our staffing, I think our classified staffing was at 175. And then from the adopted budget this year, I think we're at 203. So, or 202, 203. So the number of staff we hired, some of that was definitely needed. That's because of the pandemic. We needed extra help, extra testing, all the extra people that we needed for mental health services. And so now that the pandemic has slowed and kind of is slowing down, is now kind of getting ourselves right sized and kind of get back into our normal staffing, normal operating costs. Next slide. Property tax growth is great for this year, but the next 2 years are some challenges for us. We know we're not going to see 7.94 this year or next year rather, or the following out years. Our developer fee fund is decreasing in revenue as less people are doing home construction, less remodeling, that's less revenue the district receives in developer fees. And a lot of the portables that the district pays for BCS are being paid for from the developer fee fund, which is called Fund 25. And we'll talk about that more at adoption. But there's going to be less revenue coming in. So the district is going to have to be contributing some general fund dollars to fund the developer fee fund to pay for those portables. So that's an ongoing obligation that we have to make sure we're prepared for as well. The parcel tax expiration in June of 25 is a challenge. And we're excited to hear that we have a team that's gonna be helping us try to get this passed and get it renewed. And then also a recession, economic slowdown. It's just normal business cycle that everything up will come down and eventually go back up and down. And that's just the normal business cycle that we face. But this is a different thing that we haven't experienced since the 70s with this, like the slow growth and like the stagflation, inflation and high prices. It's so bizarre to see that inflation so high that the Federal Reserve, and we haven't seen interest rates this high in a long time. And that does worry about triggering a recession. Next slide. Some of our expenses, obviously, competitive salaries and benefits is currently on the bottom, really the bottom of all the competing districts that are around. And we're hoping that this new agreement will help us move us in the right direction. Inflation for goods and services is costing us more. Every time we buy paper, we buy books, anytime we buy supplies, custodial supplies, everything costs more. Gasoline costs more, or for maintenance and custodians, for all the work we're doing, things cost a lot more. Tonight, there's a slide we're going to talk about how can we use some of our one-time discretionary block grant dollars to actually free up some of our general fund dollars to help afford these things. Facility needs are important. I just heard tonight about sinks costing lots of water. And so I've got to find money for sinks. So, but I do agree. I do believe that because, you know, when you look at the solar parking array, the solar arrays out there, those actually save our general fund dollars. And so it's very important that we are as energy efficient as we can because it does save our general fund, and then that's more money for salaries and benefits for our employees. So there is, for what those kids said, they have a little note card. I'm gonna steal his note card. But it's really important that we do think about those is how can we use bond dollars and deferred maintenance dollars to save our general fund. And those are really important things because we need to do that. But we do have old facilities. We have some needs of the 10 sites. So all these things are things we have to be thinking about future expenses. And then Lirio talked about universal meals. This is the first time we've ever fed 3,000 kids, right? And so for us, it's exciting that we're doing this and we're doing it, but can we do it in a better way, save more money? And so we're going to be analyzing the universal meals budget and how can we do it more efficiently? And you know, right now it's costing the district $1.1 million. Can we maybe do a better model to reduce that cost a little bit? So these are some real high level things that we're thinking about. When I say like what keeps me up late at night, it's all these things, right? Because we're thinking all the things that, you know, how can we trim our costs, be competitive? If I could, you know, have a magic wand, I'd have property tax at 10% every year, but I don't think that's gonna happen. But next slide. So here's our discretionary block grant. And I'll be coming back with with an actual formal item on this one. But this is some money that we're getting from the state. It's one time. And the state is not that great financial position, so we probably will not see one-time money from the state in a long time. This is one-time money. This is what I talked about previously at the meeting in January about Governor Newsom is being put a little bit of pressure to maybe pull back some of this money. We're going to ask tonight the board to approve the full funding of the plan, and then we probably won't spend it all until we know we're going to get the actual allocation. The apportionment, we received half of the funds in November and December. The other half will be coming in April and May. So I think if it comes in May and the governor's May revise says you're going to get all the funds, then I think it'd be safe to spend that last $750,000 roughly. But we'll be talking about this in a couple more minutes. But this is a great example of these are one-time monies. You don't want to commit them to people because people are an ongoing cost. So if we can pay for technology and network switches and phones, any classroom upgrades, those are one-time expenses and that saves your general fund. So and all the expenses we want to use are coming from the unrestricted general fund. So if you can code the expense to a restricted fund, that's really where you see the savings in your budget. Next slide. This is the impact of potential salary and compensation increases. And this is without using any of the one-time money, but you can see the cost of a salary increase for, let's say it was 6%, it'd be about a $3 million cost per year. And then by next year, if you compound that, it's that percent times 2. And so now that's the ongoing expense. And you can see what it does to your reserves. And reserves is really one-time money, right? And so you have to be careful of not getting into a problem where you're spending your reserves. You can't live on spend. You can do it for a short term, but not a long term. And I know the district and everybody, we're all committed to helping be more efficient with our operations. I think that's an important thing to remember as well. And then next slide. Budget Review Committee had a nice first meeting last week. Thank you to Lirio and Brian and Vladimir were there. It's my first time being in the meeting. It's great to learn of how the district does the Budget Review Committee. I found it great. We found documents from like a long time ago. So it's really neat to see that. Our next meeting will be March 16th. April 20th will be our next one. And then May 11th, I put down as tentative. We'll just see if we need that meeting to have it on the books. But it's been great to have input on everyone. And we really are a team because when we develop these budgets, not just the business office, it's everyone. And it's really a team effort. So I really appreciate everybody coming together to help us with this committee. I think that's the last slide. If anybody has any other questions on kind of that's a very quick overview, high level overview, but just want to go over it and to talk about, there are some constraints and concerns, obviously, that we need to kind of tread optimistically cautious.
Yeah, I'll point out that this was noted as action, but we ended up moving the required action to item 3. So there is no action to be taken around this item.
Any questions clarifying questions from board members?
Are you planning a universal meals presentation sometime in the future where you can dig into some of the details about servers and costs and people and options and stuff like that?
Yeah, and
I don't know when is the right time, but just sometime, that's all.
Yeah, I can get that up in the spring, later in the spring. We could also do that. It's a great idea. We can do that.
Because that I think is the biggest chunk that's coming out of our budget that we haven't planned for.
Yeah, definitely we can do that. in future meeting.
Yeah, it'd be pretty perfect after the state audit.
Yes.
Other questions? Jessica, Shelley? Just for clarification, the slide you had about impact of raises is not, as I understand it, the content of the TA that may come before us. So I
Correct. It was
just want to clarify that so people aren't confused out there.
Correct.
If they're hearing multiple things. Forget about that slide, doesn't matter anymore.
Think about drinking water.
Okay, any board comment, request for public comment, Marcy? Okay. Any further board comments or seeing none, I think we can move on to item number 3. Get into the detail.
Okay, so next item is the approval of the expenditure plan for the art music. It's a long name, the art music instructional materials discretionary block grant. And all school districts are required to have this brought to the board at a public meeting to have approval of it. And so the next slide.
I don't think we've never slide up. It's an attachment for you. But the same
Oh.
graphic. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we could pull that up, just, sorry about that.
It's the AMINDBG, right?
Yeah.
Rolls off the tongue.
I'm gonna just blow mine up and I can read off of this. So part of the discretionary block grant is this part of the block grant is a very, I guess, liberal in its uses. And it's very discretionary, meaning you can use for operational expenses. So it's part of operational, the state in the auditing of this grant talks about operational expenses could be for pension rate, if you want to pay down your pension rates. It could be for operations for HVAC units. So it's really, when I look at it, of all the things that has to be approved by the Board of Trustees, but it's the usages could be whatever the district wants to use it for. Technology upgrades, phone upgrades, some of the things that hit our general fund budget this year that we didn't really, it's gonna save our budget. So we decided, we put some items on here. We talked about computer technology purchases, which was 500,000, which the board approved last year. I don't think we've spent the full 500,000 on the Chromebooks and Macs. We're at about 400,000, so we're under what we thought we'd be spending, but we had to spend money on network core switches, technology upgrades in the classrooms, library improvements that were not really budgeted for. The district phone system, we had some money set aside for that, and then any classroom upgrades. Here's the plan. So tonight, we're asking the board to approve the expenditure plan for the art, music, instructional materials block grant for $2.183 million. And this is an action item that we're asking the board to approve tonight. And all of these items on here meet the allowable uses for the funds.
Okay, if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comment on this item, please submit a speaker card, use the raise hand button on the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. So while we're waiting for that, are there any clarifying questions from our fellow board members? Jessica or Shally? Did we get any requests for public comments?
No request for
Okay.
public comment.
Any further board discussion?
How likely is it that the governor is gonna try to pull back some of this stuff? So in other words, what I'm saying is you're asking us to approve something that some part of it may not happen, and I'm wondering what we would do in that case.
I think we would know probably, we won't get the second apportionment until May anyways. So from my standpoint, I never like spending money until we have it. So we would probably, we would earmark this money as like, okay, we think we're gonna pay for this out of these funds. And then once we know the funds are available and the governor has approved the budget and is gonna release the funds, then I think it would be okay for us to spend them. I'm not comfortable spending the money unless I know we're gonna get it.
Is there a particular reason why you want us to approve it tonight as opposed to when we know that we have the money? I mean, I'm okay approving it, I'm just asking.
Sure. I think my standpoint is I'm gonna try to spend about $1.5 million of the one-time monies. We'll spend that to the any cost we would spend into that, and we won't spend the full amount.
Okay.
I think I want to be cautious and wait until we get until May, till the May revise, we'll know more. I think that's the safest thing to do.
I do know CSBA and I've talked to not talk to you, but CSBA and the different AXA advocacy groups are really pushing to get this fully funded because it was shared, right? We've received the first apportionment, people have planned their budget and world around this, and there's been a lot of pressure to maintain this funding for this year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm, having seen a little bit more of the details, I'm satisfied that the vast majority, if not all of this funding, are things that we basically need to do and will only cost us more in the long run if we don't do them. So, I mean, my guess is that if the governor succeeds in clawing back this money, we'll be in the same boat that most other districts will be in, which is our reserves will go down.
Right.
Because we'll need to spend this amount of money anyway. And I think that's the message that the state legislature and the governor is getting from all sides. Is basically, this is needed money. It's already been allocated in the majority of cases. And so removing it is just taking money out of all of our
In
pockets.
some cases, it's been spent.
And it's been spent. Right?
Yeah.
And one thing to point out is if we don't spend it all in this year, you can see that the funds are appropriated. You can spend it in the next year, so you don't have to spend them all this year. So if we don't know till May and we start getting ready to close the books, we can also, you can allocate the money for the next fiscal year as well. So it doesn't have, so that's kind of like a safety net also for us as well.
Okay. Any further comment? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the expenditure plan for the art, music, and instructional materials discretionary block grant.
So moved.
Moved by Vladimir, seconded by Steve. Any further discussion? We'll call the roll. Steve? Yes. Vladimir?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to another item.
Okay, busy night. Last item is, this is just a standard item and we pulled this one and did it after the budget was first or second interim was approved. This is just a standard item of authorization to increase or decrease income and expenditures. And we're not really decreasing expenditures, so we want to make it clear that the expenditures are still in our budget. We're not decreasing the amount of expenditures or transferring money out. You saw our first interim, we actually had an increase, a transfer from our general fund out to the cafeteria fund at first interim. This time, the only revenue, the only thing we're showing the changes in revenue, and that's the extra property tax growth.
Right. If anyone would like to provide public comment on this item, please submit a speaker card, use the raise hand button on the Zoom app, or press *9 if using your phone. Are there any questions from the board? We've seen this every year, so I would expect not many. Are there any requests for public comments? Seeing none. Any further discussion from the board? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve that resolution. All right, let's get a little bit more precise.
Okay, all right.
I will entertain a motion to approve resolution 22/23-11.
So moved.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Motion by Vladimir, seconded by Steve. We'll call the roll. Vladimir?
Yes.
Steve? Yes. Charlie?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to I-5. Resolution 22/23-12. We got it.
Yes, so I think Elena said it all tonight. We have been looking very closely at our future planning for next year, knowing that we need to become more competitive with salaries, that we have one-time money that was specific for COVID support that is no longer available to us. And we looked closely at a variety of positions that were newer positions over the last 3 years that really supported our COVID work. And tonight you have a resolution ahead of you that looks at laying off 2 LVNs from our current nursing staff. We believe with the work of COVID lessening, thankfully, over the last 2 years and this year in particular, with less need to notify close contacts and all of that, that the work is not there. I want to really appreciate the work of these two individuals. I know they are loved by their team, they're loved by the staff. The work they do is incredible. It's a hard decision to make. But for the kind of moving forward as an organization, I really do believe we need to look closely at our positions and begin to right size for the fiscal health of our organization.
Okay, before I ask for board questions, if anyone would like to provide public comment on this item, please submit a speaker card. Use the raise hand button on the Zoom app or press *9 if using your phone. Do you have any clarifying questions from the board? Jessica or Shelley? See, now we have one request for comment, so it will be 3 minutes. Kimberly Fletcher.
So I am commenting that I understand we do need a right size. I understand. However, as someone, I did start in the office during COVID. I have experienced nurses being there. However, as COVID has decreased, I have not seen our nurses' jobs decrease. Our nurses are out there on a regular basis in a way that many parents notice and appreciate. I see parents trusting our nurses in a way they do not trust anyone, including our principals in the office. They are coming for advice on sensitive topics, on things that they really do need advice on, that maybe their pediatrician did not give them the advice they needed. We have families who do not have access to a regular pediatrician, and our nurses help bolster and keep those kids safe and healthy and in school. Our nurses, when they're there on a regular basis, they get to know our kids, and they know the kid that's been there 3 times that week and know the thing to say to help them get back to class. I've seen our nurse sit and hold hands with a kid who was just desperately homesick, but we knew that, and they had a rapport with him and the time. I would love to sit with a kid for 20 minutes, but often our nurses are able to do that in their nurse abilities while doing other things. I've seen them help kids with eating disorders. Our nurses are checking on them on a regular basis. Are they eating? Are they doing okay? These are serious things that keep kids at home. They keep them out of school. And I've seen our nurses time after time be able to support our families in a way that keeps kids here healthy. And I've seen parents just really say, I appreciate them. I've given tours to families that said, you have a nurse? I'm so grateful. And this is something people notice when they come to our school and we do a tour and we show them this is the nurse office. They do notice, and we have families, certainly at my school, that can go somewhere else. And that is something that they recognize, and it really provides not just a theoretical value, but a very genuine value. I could manage and I could live without, it's not the time on the office. It is the very specialized care. I can tell you when our nurses are not in our office, we send more kids home because we don't know the way that a nurse knows. I sit there and go, the kid says they're in pain. I don't have the expertise to feel comfortable saying, go back to class, good luck. But a nurse has that extra training to be able to really know it's time to call the parents, or this kid's gonna be okay. We'll let the parents know they'll be fine to the end of the day. And it really makes a huge difference in the amount of minutes that kids are in school. And that is something that is a genuine value that we can add. And so thank you for all of our nurses, regardless of what you decide. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments, board comments, board discussion? Actually, sorry. You've been going first all night. Jessica or Shelley, any comments?
No.
No. All right, fine.
Could you, Sandra, could you just tell us briefly what nursing staff we have and what nursing staff will end up with in different schools?
Yeah. As a comparison.
Yeah.
Before the pandemic, we had 2 RNs and 1 LVN And we've always contracted health services for our most severe medical needs for children. So that's kind of been a little bit on the side during the pandemic, or I'll just compare it this year, this current year, we have our 2 RNs and we have 5 LVNs. And so moving forward next year, our plan is to keep 2 RNs and 3 LVNs.
So that would be an increase of over what we had
Pre-pandemic.
before, and we've also had fewer students.
Correct.
So does the coverage model then shift to certain days of the week or certain half a days a week, different campuses?
You know, it varies year by year based on the health needs of our students primarily, because we have some students who might need diabetes care at specific times. So our lead nurse works with the team to determine what that staffing schedule looks like.
And that fluctuates week to week depending on need.
Correct.
Got it.
One more comment. Sure. So this is far and away the least enjoyable part of my job.
Sure.
Yeah, I take the comments to heart. I mean, my kids are now in high school, but when they're in elementary school, when they started in elementary school, actually at pick up and drop off, there was really 1 adult in the office. Fortunately, I think that's a little bit better these days. We managed, that was sort of right after the biggest crash in funding. And I was listening, some of us attended a legislative breakfast a couple of weeks ago. And one of the presenters was telling a story from pre-Prop 13 elementary school funding. And he was describing a school of about 200 students that had 5 adults in the office. So believe me, all of us up here understand how much better that world was and how big of a difference it makes to kids to have half a dozen adults who know them and can care for them. And we very much wish we could be back in those days. There are obviously various efforts over the years to increase funding to the point where we can do that. And I'm sure as a board and administration, we will keep looking for opportunities to get all those benefits that you described so eloquently. So thank you for that. Unfortunately, I think we probably have to proceed, in my opinion, with what's before us tonight, even though we don't want to. So we'll reluctantly ask for a motion to adopt resolution 22/23-12.
Second.
Any further discussion? Motion from Steve, seconded by Vladimir. I'll call the roll. Steve? Jessica?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Vladimir?
Yep.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0. Moving on to item 6, delegate assembly election.
Yes, so I believe we postponed this from our last board meeting. So tonight you have the opportunity as a board to vote to fill 6 vacancies for the delegate assembly. In your packet and backup online, you have the information about all of the candidates along with some of the write-in candidates who came after the published materials. So you have that information. Jessica, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, I'm ready for discussion at this point. So when Brian's ready for it.
I'm just going to assume we have no public comment for this item.
There is no.
So I think we can go right for discussion. Jessica, if you'd like to lead off.
I'd love to. I attended the, Santa Clara County School Boards Association meeting over February break, and we got to listen to all the candidates give a 2-minute spiel about what they could do as a delegate for our region 20. And based on that, I have some recommendation for the 6. As you can imagine, One of them is Shally. Shally's okay. The other one would be Bridget Watson from Sunnyvale School District. Jorge Pacheco sounded wonderful. Danielle Cohen, Van Lee, and Catherine Vonnegut. Shally, do you have any comments or other suggestions?
No, I think this is a really good list. I heard all the speeches also, and these were the ones that rose to the top. So,
Any other?
and I think we know some of these people, and we know the quality of the work and how much they care about public education also.
Although I have no personal issue, I'm wondering if Shally should recuse herself from voting.
Okay, can I vote on the other side?
Oh,
Or do you want me to recuse myself completely?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm okay if you don't, but I'm just wondering if.
I think it's like voting for being a member of our executive team. I don't think we recuse ourselves from that, do we? I don't know.
No. I'm not sure it's necessary. I'm not sure.
All right, okay, that's fine. I'm just asking a question. I don't want to.
I think if we had two members and there was some contention perhaps, but okay, I think, given that we're just recommending one of our own for an office, I think I've seen other bodies do a similar thing without having the
All right.
candidate be
I'm
recused.
prepared to follow Jessica's suggestions.
Yeah, I'll say, with no implied slight to any of the other candidates, I was reading through I unfortunately wasn't able to make the meeting, but I was reading through the resumes and almost all of the names were familiar and came with long histories of public service. So, unfortunately, we can only pick 6.
No, it was a great group. I was just based on the speeches and actually, proximity to our district. That's how I came up with this list.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion, Jessica?
I move that we vote on Shally Surkey, Bridget Watson, Jorge Pacheco, Danielle Cohen, Van Lee, and Catherine Vonnegut for Delegate Assembly, Region 20.
Okay. All right. Motion by Jessica, seconded by Steve for the names as read. I will call the roll. Jessica,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Vladimir,
Yes.
Shally.
Yes.
I vote yes as well. Motion passes 5-0.
Congratulations, Shally.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Jessica, do you know when we hear who's the results of the elections?
That I don't know, but I can ask.
Just curious.
You win in my heart.
Oh.
Yeah, for anybody who's watching, this is a sort of strange procedure where every board determines 6 votes and then each board gets sort of one collective set of 6 votes. And then whoever gets the most votes from the most boards in the end becomes delegate assembly members. Stay tuned for whatever accounting procedure that requires. All right. Moving on. For board administration comments. No, nothing. Eric? Steve? Good. Jessica?
What do I have here? For my FCC SBA duties, I toured Pali Child Development Pathway program, which was quite interesting. While it's not something we would do because we're not a high school district, it was quite interesting. They actually have basically a technical education course where boys and girls are learning how to do preschool education and actually elementary education. And then they're practicing it in their preschool and in their elementary schools. And also visited Juntos, which is a dual immersion program for Sunnyvale. I attended the STEM career night. I already mentioned I attended the SEC SBA meeting. Not only did we hear speeches from the delegates, we got to listen to a wonderful presentation on expulsions and discipline that was moderated by our own Shally Sirke. She did a wonderful job. And I attended in person the legislative breakfast put on by SCC SBA. And that's it.
Shall I?
I went to the legislative brunch as well and did some site visits, like Jessica mentioned, for Los Gatos Saratoga Unified High School District. They have a program for kids who are 18 and are high special needs, which I thought was a really inspiring, really great program, and something that, you know, our parents should know about in our own MVLA district, that, you know, once they leave us, that their children who are special needs are still very supported. Went to Juntos with Jessica, was super impressed by them. And, you know, the neat thing is it's nice to get out of our district and see what other districts are doing. So that was a lot of fun. And of course, the School Boards Association meeting. So I saw a lot of my board members the last 2 weeks. It was awesome. That's it.
Sandra, anything else?
No.
Okay, I don't think I have anything. I unfortunately was only able to listen remotely to the legislative brunch, but
Still, you're still welcome.
what's that?
Probably why you're well, so.
Yeah, probably. And on that note, we are adjourned.